Nigeria's main opposition party, PDP, rejects temporal as Senate minority leader says can't be trusted. EU releases final report says Nigeria's 2023 elections marred by problems that reduce public trust in electoral process and voting. Dramas Osun Governor Adeleke's aides ex-Senate spokesman clash at Eid prayers in Osogbo. And outside of Nigeria, Sierra Leone's main opposition candidate Kamara rejects presidential election results. African leaders meet in Angola to discuss tensions in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And joining us today for our conversation, we have Dr. Nicholas Felix, former Deputy National Youth Coordinator, APC Presidential Campaign Council. He joins us in Abuja. And we also have Deji Ajari, a public affairs analyst, also joining us from Abuja. I am Rita Omodia. Stay with us on Politics HQ as we'll be right back. Following the recent removal of subsidies, the World Bank has warned that the Nigerian government may have to deal with a poorer population of palliatives not arranged by the government. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu on May 29th announced the removal of petroleum subsidy, a decision which has since caused an increase in the price of petroleum, the nation's major source of fuel. New policy changes around the naira and the increasing inflation in the country also threaten the sustenance and livelihood of the people, with the World Bank saying Nigeria may have about half of its projected population in poverty. Joining me on the show today to unpack this is Dr. Nicholas Felix, is a former Deputy National Youth Coordinator for the APC Presidential Campaign Council in Abuja. Thank you so much for joining me on Politics HQ.
Thank you for having me. Good to be here.
Wonderful. And we also have Deji Ajari, is a public affairs analyst, also joining us from Abuja, Nigeria. Thank you for joining us on Politics HQ.
Thank you for having me. Good evening.
Good evening. And I'm going to begin with you, Dr. Nicholas Felix. I mean, we're looking at situations there. And we had an outgone president, that is Muhammad Buhari. And we saw the spokesman yesterday defending the decision to delay the removal of the subsidy. He said, due to political situations, unification of a lot of things, it was moved to a better time. Looking at how this has impacted on the economy, would you say that it really is a better time that we have it now?
Again, thank you for having me, and good evening to Nigerians. I don't know if there is a better time to remove the subsidy. The subsidy is something that has been discussed several times, and several presidents, beginning from even Goodluck Jonathan, has always wanted to remove the subsidy. So even if the subsidy was removed in 2015, 2019, I'm sure we're still going to be faced with the same issue. So there is no better time to remove subsidy. I think it's even the issue here is which president has the guts, the political will, and the boldness to do the needful. And we can see that person is President Tinubu. So, but there is no better time to remove the subsidy. What we should be focusing on is the way forward.
Okay, I'm going to come back to you, Felix, but I'm going to bring Deji into this conversation. And let's look at how much this has impacted on the economy. We talk about if this is a better time, if there will ever be a better time. But we've seen Nigerians on the street complaining about a whole lot of things with the removal of this fuel subsidy. So first of all, do you believe that this was the right decision? And how do you look at it impacting on the economy and the livelihoods of Nigerians?
Well, thank you again for having me, and good evening. Like Ms. time to remove subsidy. Subsidy should have been removed years before now. And matter of fact, it was cowardly of President Muhammad Buhari to have deferred the removal of fuel subsidy to his successor, President Tinubu. It is basically a transfer of responsibility that ought ordinarily to have been taken by him, having ordinarily seen that fuel subsidy has been corrupted, and it was apparently a waste and a waste of Nigeria's resources. Now, talking about its removal and its impact on Nigerians, the truth is, subsidies generally are aimed at helping protecting the poor and vulnerable populations from the impact of high prices of such products. But it is the corruption in subsidy that made its removal very important. And another reason is because, in fact, indeed, the bulk of the consumption of these products that we're talking about is not done by those vulnerable population that the government is actually aiming or seeking to compensate. And so, having removed it, its impact is such that at the end of the day, it has increased not just the cost of petroleum products, PMS specifically, but it has had a spiral effect on even transportation and other products that are dependent on the usage of petroleum products, such as, for instance, things as little as, salon services, food prices, cost of commodities generally. And it is not just, we're not just yet there. The truth of the matter is that the removal, the real impact of the removal, we are only going to start feeling it in the next couple of weeks or months rather, because some of the products that are currently being sold were probably products that had been in circulation or that had been at least within the shores of the country even before the removal of subsidies. So I anticipate that the impact of the removal of fuel subsidy is going to come in and is going to continue to trickle down over the next several weeks to come. And it is the reason that one would have expected that a very sensitive government, and in this case, I'm speaking about the government of President Muhammadu Buhari, and even the current president, President Tinubu, a very sensitive government will suspend the removal and, as a matter of fact, put in place those palliatives, those compensatory actions or activities that are aimed at reducing the effect of this subsidy. Because naturally, Nigeria is a country that is prone to inflationary trends. If you have watched and look at the trends in the past. Yeah. And so the price of petroleum products, which is one that impacts on practically every.
All right, now, Deji, while we're still looking at this impact of the removal of fuel subsidy, I'm going to bring in Dr. Felix into this conversation. Now, we're still looking at this political factor that President Buhari mentioned, and he said it was a major reason for the delay. How much is this a reflection of our politics? And we've seen a lot of switch in approach between President Buhari and Tinubu's administration. Within how many days, there's so many things that President Tinubu as administration has done. So for your party's ideology, is it based on the individual, or does the party have its own basic ideology that it follows?
Of course, we do know when an administration comes in, the manifesto of that administration is what is played out, is what is carried out. Now, the statement made that it was because of the election, that's why the subsidy wasn't removed. And we're talking about 8 years. I'm not sure how true that is, whether subsidy was removed or not. I'm quite sure President Tinubu would have won the election. If you ask me, what had more effect was the naira redesign. So that statement coming at this time, I really cannot, I don't think it holds any water. The issue has been the president's will, the boldness to do this. Now, my dear brother is talking about this could have been suspended. You see, that's what have been the issue. There's always a reason why subsidies should be suspended. And before you know it, one administration is gone. There are always reasons. There's no better time to remove it. And I don't think you can be well prepared to the effect of subsidy. The palliative we're talking about here, giving out palliative, you and I know, Nigeria don't have a system where even if palliative are given, that the average Nigerian will get it. Take, for example, during the COVID shutdown, the palliatives were given out. It was during the NSAS we began to see that some of these governments, the governors, the local government chairmen, they were holding all these palliatives. So for me, I don't think this temporary measure is what we need. What we should be clamoring on and talking about is the permanent solution. How do we get the price of PMS down? And we know one of the ways that's going to happen if a refinery starts operating, the Dangote refinery, which is scheduled to begin in the month of July. Let's begin to look at these measures and see how we can bring the price of PMS down. Palliative, giving out food or temporary peanuts here and there to Nigerians, it's not a permanent solution. How many months are you going to do that? And the system we have does not, allow the average Nigerian who this palliative are meant for really get to them. The federal government can allocate some palliative. It will not get to the people. So let's focus on the permanent solution on how to get the price of PMS down, creating more jobs for Nigeria. We're talking about increasing the minimum wage. All of these are what we should be looking at, not just on the palliative. There's no better time to have done this. Even if the palliative was not removed now, President Tinubu decided to remove it next year, next 2 years, we're still going to be faced with the same challenges.
All right. I'm still going to pick with you, Dr. Felix. You talked about the fact that it's not just about palliatives, about the price of PMS down, working refineries. These are all workable solutions, but they are not necessarily present solutions. I mean, how soon exactly can we get the price of PMS down? How soon can the refineries start working? We talk about the Dangote refineries. How soon will it kickstart? So that's why some Nigerians are saying, for now, what can the government do to make sure that they don't feel the pain of this removal of fuel subsidy, and that's why the palliatives are there. So for palliatives, don't you think that that will be, for the meantime, ways that Nigerians can, cushion this effect of the removal of fuel subsidy? Because if you go to the streets of Nigeria, people are having a hard time dealing with this issue. So let's look at the short time frame and the long time frame of a solution towards the removal of the fuel subsidy.
Yes, I'm not against the short-term solution, which is the palliative. I think the reason why I'm not too big on that is just because of the system we have. Money allocated to the poor Nigerians, it never gets to them. Food, allocated to Nigeria never gets to them. That's why I really don't, focus on that. Now, talking about the permanent solution, July, the month of July, we're almost there. Today is the 27th or 28th, thereabout, 28th of June. So in a couple of weeks, the Dangote refinery will begin operation. And we are aware that it can, process about 650,000 barrels per day. I don't know the dynamics between the NNPC and the refinery. I would think this refinery should have more than enough daily so that Nigerians will begin to, our filling stations will begin to get the fuel directly from the Dangote refinery. I believe that we have a huge effect. Now, we all know, like Deji said, the amount of fuel that the subsidy that the Nigerian government paid is not even what we, the average Nigerian, consume. Most of this goes to other neighborhood country. So the issue now is, by the time the Dangote refinery begins to process over 650,000 barrels per day, we'll be able to know exactly what we consume in Nigeria and see how far that will go. So that is the near future, which is just a couple of weeks from now. I don't know how long it will take for our own refinery to be in operation. We have about 3 of them. I think when one comes into place, having 2 of them now, that will go a long way. So I think we should be focusing on the Dangote refinery. I don't know what the dynamic is, like I said, and how the effect that we have on PMS prices. But I think it will go a long way. Now for the palliative, yes, that can go into effect, but I really don't trust the system. The average Nigerian. I'm afraid by the time the federal government begin to put more effort on this temporary palliative, it might end up slowing the permanent solution down. So that's why I think we're already bearing it. It's already 1 month since the palliative was taken out. And Nigerians understand that this is for our good. They are feeling the pains, we do understand, but the pain is temporary. Let us focus more, let the federal government put more effort on the permanent solution, not just on this palliative.
Thank you so much, Dr. Felix. And the way you say the pain is temporal, for an average Nigeria, that one-day pain can be very excruciating. Now, still talking about the hardship that Nigerians are facing, and I'm going to bring Deji into all of this. We're looking at either the short-term solution, long-term solutions. Dr. Felix mentioned about regulating the price of PMS. He also talked about, making sure that we have workable refineries. I'm going to bring a code from the Abuja State Governor. Now, he said that what is important is not that subsidy is removed, but the ability to sustain that removal, and the only way to do it is moving from regulation to deregulation. So, Deji, we've had different takes on the issue. I would like your take on that.
Okay, thank you very much. You see, long-term solution and long-term solution must be there. And the approval for the Dangote refinery came as a very big relief. And when it starts functioning, it will obviously, and all things being equal, serve as one of those long-term measures. But it is not enough. Now, you do not want to transfer, you remove from one problem to another, because when you now create a private monopoly, it could even be worse than what we had before. So what is important, it is, while it is good that Dangote refinery has, kicked off and is going to start producing refining products very soon, one is very glad. But it is also important that care must be taken not to unwittingly create a private monopoly. And so licenses must be provided, and equal playing field must be provided for all investors in that sector. As regards the issue of short-term palliatives, I think Dr. Nicholas is making the mistake of thinking that when we speak palliative, we speak about taking things and giving directly to citizens. No, absolutely. I share the thoughts of Dr. Nicholas that the Nigerian system is set up to be rigged at all times. And so anytime any arrangement is made to give handouts to people, it will always fail. The civil service, before we can attain that kind of level of a system where we can give handouts to people directly and it will work, then there's going to be need for a systemic change within the civil service. But this is the point. You cannot say you are deregulating the petroleum sector and in one breath, and on the other hand, you want to continue to manage the prices. You cannot do that, because what it means is that you've not taken your hands off it. And those who are involved in the buying and selling will always have constraints, because you are not the key determinants. The market forces should be the ones determining the prices, the forces of demand and supply. And at the end of the day, it is the final consumers that will eventually be the ones to bear the cost. Because as long as you are not the ones bearing the cost, or you're not providing subsidies, then you have no business determining prices. And so I agree with Alex Oti when he said, look, the real solution ultimately is taking your eyes off it and moving directly to deregulation. But while you are doing this, and while we are taking that as a long-term plan, it is important that before we get to that final place, things must be put in place. And I mean it, palliatives. And palliatives does not mean handouts. We can put in place transport systems that will reduce the excruciating pains that citizens are going through daily. You can put in place other things, other facilities that will ensure that the impact of the triplification of the cost of fuel is not felt as much as it is currently being felt. Because the problem is that the citizens may die before you get to the point where you eventually find a solution. Like the World Bank said in its reports just yesterday, about 6 to 7 million Nigerians may be pushed into poverty as a result of the impact of this removal of the fuel subsidy. So you see, the point is that at the end of the day, the government must be sensitive. You cannot sit in elitist arrogance and say, oh, people should bear it. People cannot bear it. There are people who cannot afford to bear it.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, Deji. Now, back to you, Dr. Felix. You mentioned some issues on the palliatives. These are very serious issues there, because we remember during the COVID-19 era, COVID-19 in the year 2020, where the Humanitarian Affairs Minister mentioned the fact that they had given palliatives to the poorest of the poorest. You also mentioned the fact that you can't trust the Nigeria administrative sector. But let's not be too comfortable with the fact that something that should be normal has become abnormal. What exactly are the issues? What are the federal government doing to make sure that if these palliatives are eventually given, because people are suffering a whole lot of it, that it actually gets to the people? What measures can be done to checkmate all of this? Or should we just continue with the fact that things are bad and that's just the way it is?
Yes. Again, like I said, I'm not against the palliatives. I'm just concerned that when too much effort are put or discussions are put into the temporary measures,
Yeah, we're looking at ways to checkmate these issues.
Yes, I understand. Yes, I mean, the system is already there. When you look at the diversity and you look at the nature of this country, I believe in America for 20 years before coming to Nigeria. And when I look at the way the system is, it's not going to be an overnight thing. So giving out palliatives in this current situation, it's going to be difficult for the federal government to monitor it in its totality. Again, let's look at the recent experience of the COVID-19 when palliatives were given. The federal government came out and stated that they gave this, and it was almost like she was lying. And at the end of the day, if not the NSAS protest that caused Nigerian youth to begin to break into this story, we wouldn't have even known that there was palliatives given out. That's for the raw food. And in terms of the cash, how would they ever even know that some money was allocated to poor Nigerians? So that's why I'm saying, while the federal government is working on that, let's focus our energy on, the permanent solution, which is the Dangote refinery, and of course, making sure that our own refinery. What we should be discussing now is the fact that now that subsidy is removed, it means the government is saving a whole lot of money on what they would have been paying for subsidy, which has been in place all these years. What we should be discussing now is taking those resources and maybe putting it in other sectors. Like Deji talked about the transportation system, we look for how to share it among states, cities, and our towns, which is among the temporal measures. We look at how much of these resources can go into our refineries so that we don't just depend on the Dangote refinery for too long. These are some of the things I believe the federal government and even the NLC should be discussing with the federal government. They talk about the minimum wage. It's okay, but now, when you talk about minimum wage, even if the federal or state government increase the minimum wage, the question is, what is the percentage of Nigeria that works with the federal government? Is it sustainable with the private sector? That's another thing. We did increase maybe a company that has 10 employees because of increase in minimum wage now decide to reduce it to 5. So we have to look at all these measures. But I believe the solution is getting the price of PMS down. I don't believe in the fact that the federal government cannot regulate the price. We have to be very careful when we look at that, because if you leave just the price to just the marketers to decide, they can be in agreement and allow this thing to remain in this price. So I believe in all our sector, including our communication sector. I pay more here in Nigeria for my communication system than even in America. MTN, owned by a South African company, it's not the same price they pay even in South Africa. Why? They have loose hands to just do whatever they want when they come to our country. The federal government, our legislators must always have a say in the price regulation. Because they are not subsidizing does not mean they can just do whatever they like in our country. No, they must be able to have a say in this. That's what is obtainable in the Western world. They can't just come to Nigeria. Why will MTN, for example, a company based in South Africa, we pay more on our calls and data here than they do in their own country? Because the government have a say in the regulation of the pricing. So I focus now, while we are discussing the palliative, let's make sure we put it the NLC as they sit down to discuss with the federal government. It should not just be about increasing the price, the amount of minimum wage, tripling it. How do we get the price of PMS down? That should be in our discussion also.
All right. Definitely part of the discussions. And I'm going to bring Deji into all of this, because as much as a lot of people are saying, yes, it's a good thing that removal of fuel subsidy should be done. You talked about so many advantages, saving a whole lot of money for the government and all of that. Let's also still have a background context, because I'm sure some other people, or for the benefit of knowledge of our audience there, what exactly these benefits are. Because someone is out there sitting down and saying, why exactly should we have to suffer so much? What are the gains that Nigerians will benefit from at the end of all of this with this removal of the fuel subsidy? Because we remember in 2015 when former President Buhari said that this fuel subsidy is a scam. So can Nigerians trust the Tinubus administration that with the removal of fuel subsidy, the benefits of all of this can at the end be felt by the citizens?
You see, of course, when President Muhammad Buhari said the subsidy regime itself was a scam, it was right, and it is indicative. It is indicative of failure of governance, and that failure is that of successive governments, including his own government. Because when a government throws up its hand and says it is unable to control its citizens, its civil service, its ministries, departments, and agencies, that basically is the government saying it has failed in that area. And I think the admission that subsidy is a scam, both by Goodluck Jonathan administration, by the Buhari administration, and of course even by the Tinubus administration, is an admission of failure on the part of all of those governments, and it is irrespective under which parties they were elected. And so it is a failure of governance. And we as citizens must understand it, that it is because government has failed to control and manage subsidy properly that Nigerians are going to support the removal of subsidy, so that the monies that would be saved from what ordinarily would have gone into subsidy, that would have gone into private pockets mostly, are now put to social amenities, social infrastructures that will eventually benefit the generality of the citizens. I will never support any arrangement that fashions some sort of cash handouts, cash transfers to citizens. Nah, never. I do not think it makes any sense. But put these funds into use, into perhaps improving public basic education, improving basic healthcare facilities across the country, improving the public transport system, and so on and so forth, that the generality of Nigerians will feel its impact without having to queue up at any point in time or fill some forms at any point in time to receive some alerts or something that at the end of the day will be mired in controversy. Now, the worry that people like us have is that if government failed in its in managing the subsidy regime, which is basically an administrative process, what is that assurance that we have as Nigerians, really, that those funds that will be saved eventually will not be mismanaged, just like this subsidy fund will be mismanaged, and our governments will come back to us to tell us that, oh, they have failed and there is nothing we as citizens can do about it. So that is the cause of concern for each other, of course.
Thank you so much, Deji, Ajari. Definitely lots of concerns, and we do hope that the government will be able to answer these questions. We'll go for a quick break. When we come back, we'll continue with discussions on the removal of fuel subsidy, its impact on Nigerians, and the way forward. Do stay with us on Politics HQ. Thanks for staying with us on Politics HQ. Now, the decision to remove petroleum subsidy has set Nigeria into one of its most challenging periods in recent time. As Nigerians grapple with the effects of the decisions of the new administration, the former president has insisted it was a political decision not to set such policies in motion. The policies, some of which are unpopular, have become divisive, and President Muhammadu Buhari has said it could have been fatal for his party at the polls if he had made those decisions earlier. In revelations that prove the timing of the decision was best for a new administration's goodwill, the former president hailed the decision of the current government despite the difficulties Nigerians are facing. And still with us on Politics HQ, we have Dr. Nicholas Felix, a former Deputy National Youth Coordinator, APC Presidential Campaign Council, Abuja. We also have Deji Ajari, is a legal practitioner. He joins us also from Abuja, Nigeria. Thank you so much for joining us on Politics, for staying with us on Politics HQ. And I'm going to start with you now for the second half. That is Dr. Felix. We're looking at the situations there, and we're seeing the World Bank saying that high inflation has been driven by the monetization of the fiscal deficit by the CPN, multiple exchange rates and exchange rate depreciation, the parallel market, intensified trade restrictions, exacerbated by the spike in global food and energy prices. So it's one thing for the removal of fuel subsidy, but Nigeria is also facing high inflation. Let's talk about these issues and how it has affected the current economic situation we're witnessing in the country.
All right. You see, one thing I want to assure Nigerians on this issue is the fact that we have a new president. This is a new administration. And looking at just the few days of President Tinubu, you can see that if all Nigerians can testify that he's making effort in just 3 weeks, getting policies in place that will cushion the economic effects and what we're facing right now. If I may just throw back on, this subsidy of a thing, I think we're glad that we have a president like President Tinubu to be the one to have removed subsidy. So why will you say that? Because the benefit of the subsidy is the money that the federal government is going to be saving. I couldn't have trusted any other administration to have been able to utilize these resources that we are saving, to be able to put back in the economy, getting our refineries working, that will cushion the effect. Luckily, we have a president who has the political will. That is very important in every administration. The political will, the boldness to be able to take decisions that will benefit the average Nigerian. So we are glad that this president removed subsidy. And we know very well that President Tinubu is one president that is going to ensure that every single dime that we are saving from the removal of subsidy goes into the Nigerian economy, whereby it will pushing the effects. I know inflation rate is currently high, but these policies are put in place to be able to reduce inflation, to be able to cause our economy that has been stalled for a very long time to begin to work again. Now, it's just 3 weeks this administration began. Give it another 6 months. The cabinet is not even in place yet. Give it another 6 months. I believe we'll begin to see the effects of these policies that the President Tinubu has been signing and putting in place. Is going to be able to help, cushion what is currently going on right now.
Now, when you say he's going to be able to cushion all of this, you talk about so much that this President Tinubu's administration will do, and the fact that he was thinking about Nigerians. I'm going to go a bit back to the fact that he talked about the fact that it could have been fatal for his party. I mean, was that quite sensitive of the president, looking at what Nigerians will go through if this removal of fuel subsidy did happen? So was he sensitive to Nigerians? Was he just thinking about the party and winning for the APC to win this election? Because you talk about the fact that it's good that the APC has continued and that it's in the hands, that this removal of fuel subsidies in the hands of the APC. So is it just about the party or about what Nigerians will enjoy from it? Dr. Felix, that question is to you.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, go on, please.
All right. I'm a member of the APC, and in the last presidential election, I'm sure you're aware I was the youngest presidential aspirant. Now, that may just be an excuse. That's the first time I'm hearing it. If you're talking about being a party, I don't believe removal of fuel subsidy. It could have been done the first term of the president if you wanted to remove fuel subsidy. It could have been done maybe the first year of the second term and be able to put things in place to cushion it, whereby by now we won't be talking about high price. So I think that may just be an excuse. President Tinubu went in a campaign. I was in almost every campaign, state to state, campaigning, doing what is necessary. Fuel subsidy or not, I think I know the president would have won the election. The naira redesign was more impactful to us, but if I want to speak as a party man, the naira redesign, few months to election, cost us more harm and damage than even talking about fuel subsidy. Everybody knows that fuel subsidy has to be removed. This is one policy. In my few years in politics, this is the first time I'm seeing almost every leading candidate agree on one thing. Usually they disagree no matter how good it is. They just find reason to disagree. But everybody agreed that fuel subsidy was a scam. Nigerians are not angry that fuel subsidy was removed. Now, if it wasn't a scam, how come these marketers have not come to debunk all the things thrown out there? They haven't come to say what we are saying is a lie. So everybody knows that this was a scam. It should be removed. If not, we're just feeling the effect. And Nigerians understand. And, they are being patient. They know this president is working and things are going to be working fine. So that statement, I don't want to buy it. I don't believe it. The president would have won regardless. If they really wanted the president to make sure that the president did not go through, current president did not go through stress during our campaign, I think Emefiele would have stopped this nonsense of naira redesign. So let's not believe that statement. Our focus right now is the current administration, giving President Tinubu all the desired support to cause things to begin to work in our country. So they can come out to say whatever they want, but I don't want us to focus on that and believe fuel subsidy wasn't removed because the president need to, just because of our party issue. I don't believe that.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Felix. I mean, we'll definitely look at the current administration, but at the same time, since it's the APC, there will also be some limelight of what the former administration, which is also APC, that's the former President Muhammad Buhari, had to do concerning the situations and why he did not do it since and had to wait till after the election before removing the fuel subsidy. Now, talking about the first half of the year where President Muhammad Buhari was in the administration, we saw that the CBN implemented measures to control rising inflation, including raising the monetary policy rate by 700 basis points. We're looking at what the administration has done before and what we're hoping to see in the future, because the World Bank is saying that people are going to go into abject poverty if the government does not do something to cushion the effect of this removal of the fuel subsidy. So looking at past and present, do you think that the former administration, I'm coming to you now, Deji, did enough to cushion this effect of this inflation? Because inflation did not start today. Buhari had about 8 years in the administration, and in those 8 years, we've seen rising inflation. We've also seen rising debt. What is your assessment of all of this? Deji, can you hear
I think
me?
I think it's obvious that the central bank did not just fail in putting in place measures to curb inflation in the last administration, but he did in fact contribute to inflationary trends under the last administration, of course, with devaluation and poor monetary policies. And of course, I don't need to go into Dr. Nicholas had already mentioned. We talked about the naira redesign that caused so much pain to Nigerians, and as it turned out to just be a mere political antic and nothing more. It is a very, very disappointing move by the CBN under Muhammad Buhari. In any event, one had expected that when Muhammad Buhari came in, because of his pattern, lifestyle, and all of that, he would have walked down government spending. We look quite a lot of us who were excited when he became president in 2015 and anticipated, a reduction in government cost of governance. I mean, in terms of remunerations, in terms of cost of a lot of administrative activities that go on within governance. We had expected that those would be put in place, which would have at least short funds for government to put into transport infrastructure and thereby reducing eventually cost of goods, and of course naturally translating to reducing inflation. But unfortunately, they didn't do that. And again, still going back to PMS, President Muhammad Buhari had 8 years to do something about fuel subsidy, but failed or refused to do so. And in that, of course, by that was a major failure to reduce inflation. Of course, you and I know that petroleum products constitute the bulk of imports as a country. And so when you fail to work on that subsidy, which of course would have reduced the imported PMS ultimately, and thereby improving our balance as a precedent to do that. And I think
Deji, can you hear me?
yes, I can, absolutely.
Okay, now I'm going to stay with you a bit. We're still looking at the different sectors. In your earlier submission, you mentioned talk about transportation. I mean, the reason why a lot of people are talking about this removal of fuel subsidies is that fuel is connected to a whole lot of things in the economy, talking about different sectors. Talk about transportation, talk about food prices. It somehow boils down to how high or how low the price of fuel is. Now, for this current administration, we'll look at basic sectors, look at transportation, look at health insurance, we'll look at also the price in the market, food prices. What are some of the measures that you're expecting for this present administration to do to make sure that, to stabilize the economy? Because inflation is at a high rate, and the World Bank has said that a lot of other international organizations have said that Nigeria is going to go into deep poverty if this continues. What are your expectations for this new administration?
Oh, well, let me first start by saying I think the government has started out on a good note first with the removal of fuel subsidy, although I believed that they could have done better. But I mean, its removal, the courage, the boldness to go ahead and implement it is something. And so that's one. Secondly, the harmonization, the changes within with the pricing of forex is one major step. And by the time they eventually harmonize the pricing, it is going to go a long way in stabilizing the economy. But beyond that, like I had said earlier, seeing that petroleum is the mainstay of our economy as of today, and seeing that it also constitutes the bulk of the imports of Nigeria, I think it is important that the government sets itself consciously to increase the number of private refineries licensees across the country, and to ensure that it gives as much support as Dangote Refinery received to all those other prospective investors. The reason, like I said earlier, is that we must consciously avoid creating a private monopoly. It will not augur well for the country. Now, but in the meantime, the government, while it is doing this, must now ensure, like I had said earlier, I am not for regulation of the price of petroleum products. But while government is doing all of this to ensure that ultimately the price of PMS goes down, government must also look inwards. We have an over-bloated cost of governance budget. I think it is very important. And if Nigerians are going through a hard time, if Nigerians are going through a hard time feeling the bite of the financial crunch right now, I think government must not be immune. Government must not be protected from feeling that same impact. In fact, it is only when government functionaries start feeling the impact of the financial crisis that we are in, because we are in a financial crisis. It is only when they start feeling it in terms of what comes to them too from government that there will be conscious, deliberate, and constitutive action from each and every one of them. So when you go to the National Assembly, for instance, rather than talking about increasing remuneration of government functionaries, at this time, I think what we should be doing is we should be talking about reducing them. We should be talking about reducing cost of governance through harmonizing ministries and agencies that perform similar functions. We should be talking about reducing cost of governance by ensuring that, in fact, we have fewer aides to heads of government, because really a lot of the jobs that they do, and one is not downplaying the functions that they perform, but they can be harmonized. And so when we do that, we're going to save quite a lot. You will find that we're going to save quite a lot that can be put into infrastructure, into facilities that at the end of the day will benefit more Nigerians and ultimately lead to a better living standard for Nigerians.
Okay. Thank you so much, Deji. Now, quickly, because time is far run out. Dr. Felix, you talk about so much about Tinubu's administration and what he has done so far. And we must say we've seen lots of appointments going on. We've seen detentions also going on. We've seen questioning going on. What more are we to expect from Tinubu's administration? Because there were also lots of talk about the health status, how well he can actually sustain all of this, and also the issue of corruption. I mean, what are the highlights? What are the policies that we should expect for President Tinubu? Because as much as he has done a lot of things, if corruption is still at the root center, then there will be a problem. So let's talk about that.
Yes, I think I can but just jump into the issue of his health, because this was one thing that was so heavy during the campaign. Talk about his health, his health, his health. And some people came out and said he will not be able to stand the rigorousness of campaign, the stress of campaign. He went through all of that, and like I must tell you, the president is doing very well. The president's health is, in great condition. Now, he's been appearing almost every day. I don't think since he assumed office, there's no day we have not heard from the president. There are a lot of policies. Understand, we're not dealing with a state government or a local government. We're dealing with the entire nation. This president is looking into every situation, every ministry, and is making a lot of changes. So many appointments have already gone on. Within the next 2 weeks, a statement has been released that the president is going to be setting up his cabinet. I think we should be expecting a lot from that cabinet. And when the cabinet is instituted, then we start looking at policies, because most of these policies are signing, the ministers and the heads of parastatals are the ones who are going to be implementing them. I think that's where we're going to be expecting a lot of the president. Now, based on what I've heard about this president, those who have known him for a very long time, it's not the kind of president like some past presidents who appoint ministers and go and sit down and say, I trust you, just do whatever you have to do. And at the end of the day, we don't see policies being implemented, and we see corruption all over the place. This is a man who is hands-on. You give you a job, ensure that you do the job, not just by monitoring you, but also aiding you. Now, I've always used this example when it comes to midwife. I don't know, in those states during the campaign, I give a scenario that if you have a wife as a husband, or you have a sister as a brother, who's your wife is pregnant and is going through serious complication, the first thing you do is to look for an experienced midwife who knows how to deliver and make sure that the baby comes alive and the mother also is alive. That's who we have now. We have an experienced midwife.
Okay.
Someone who, as Lagos State was able to do well. So
definitely a lot of optimism for President Tinubu's administration, but I would say the time will tell. Let's see if he can sustain the momentum. Unfortunately, we will have to wrap this up. Thank you so much, Dr. Nicholas Felix, for joining us on Politics HQ, and also Deji Ajari for sharing your candid thoughts on the issue. Thank you for joining us on Politics HQ.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.